Quick little issue there. Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox just checking to make sure we're broadcasting very clear. Looks it. Okay, we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Thank you so much for joining us. You can always contact us because we have a lot to talk about. If you did not hear about Adam Schiff yesterday being censored, we'll talk about that in the House, of course. That'll be coming up in a little bit as he's vying to take the spot of Dianne Feinstein. Of course, he's not running for re-election. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Before that, I put my contact information up for two reasons. One, I would hope that you'll weigh in on the various things we discussed this morning, but also because tomorrow on the program, we'll have Assemblyman Chris Friend. If you've been following what's happening in Albany, yesterday they wrapped up that special session. So we will ask him a lot of questions about the session, the New York State budget, the last end of session, that and much more. On today's program, though, we have the author of Overture of Hope, Two Sisters' Daring Plan that Saved Opera's Jewish Stars from the Third Reich. Her name is Isabel Vincent. You may recognize the name. She's an investigative reporter with the New York Post. So we're going to hear from her about that book that is out on paperback currently. As a matter of fact, it looked better earlier. But that's the idea of what the book looks like. Okay, enough of that. So, as I mentioned, Adam Schiff, censored by the House for his false allegations on Trump-Russia collusion. There you go. The resolution passed 213 to 209 in a vote. Every Republican voted for it except for 6 who voted present. We'll explain that in just a second. And every Democrat voted against it, of course. People yelling at Speaker McCarthy as he was beginning the vote, shame. They yelled weak leadership, disgrace. They brought up George Santos a lot. Now, it was the second time the House tried to pass a resolution censoring Adam Schiff, and both were put forward by Representative Anna Paulina Luna from Florida. The original one wanted to fine him $16 million because that was a cost to taxpayers for the Mueller investigation. Well, that was Democrats rejected that one, and 20 Republicans opposed it. With that language removed about the $16 million fine, it was able to pass on a party line vote. According to Luna, who put forth the bill, as chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff launched an all-out political campaign built on baseless distortions against a sitting U.S. president at the expense of every single citizen in this country and the honor of the House of Representatives. This is what she said before the vote. With access to sensitive information unavailable to most members of Congress and certainly not accessible to the American people, Schiff abused his privileges, claiming to know the truth while leaving Americans in the dark about his web of lies. Lies so severe that they altered the course of the country forever. Now, Schiff, in typical fashion, was pretty high and mighty with what he had to say, saying it was an honor, badge of honor that this was happening. Know you by your enemies, these type of things. Nancy Pelosi, it was interesting. You know what? No. I'm going to leave you hooked on that. Nancy Pelosi had something to say about this, and I think there's an interesting take on it that we'll get to in just a moment. But again, you can weigh in on what we are discussing this morning. What did you think? Did you watch any of it? Are you watching the recaps this morning? Were you surprised? I know that this was, I'm not saying a long time coming, but as I said, that other bill with the $16 million fine was put forward not that long ago. So I would like to hear what you have to say about it. When we come back, we'll talk more about it. Also, I do want to play a special segment from Maggie Hall from Big Fox News at 10 about the Corning Salvation Army. So we'll play that at some point on the program this morning as well. So jam-packed. Stay right there. We'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Thank you so much for joining us. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Talking about the censor of Adam Schiff. Nancy Pelosi spoke on the floor saying, and there's two reports on this. One, the first one from Fox, and then the second one from Axios. She said the other side has turned this chamber where slavery was abolished, where Medicare and Social Security and everything were instituted. And we've turned it into a puppet show. And you know what? The puppeteer, Donald Trump, is shining a light on the strings. You look miserable, period. You look miserable, you're wasting time. Now, why did I make sure to put that pause in there, that period? Well, because according to Axios, she turned to Luna and added, you look miserable, specifically calling out Representative Luna and calling her, or suggesting that she looks miserable. I just wonder, pure curiosity, let's say the roles were reversed there, and Representative Luna looked at Nancy Pelosi and said, you look miserable. You look miserable. Would that maybe get a little more attention? Maybe get a little more cringe? I don't know. The wording there very strange. Again, I mentioned that when this was all happening, McCarthy, after the vote, was crowded near the dais and chanting shame. And people were yelling Santos. I have all night, McCarthy said, as he tried to ask for Schiff to present himself so he could be censored. Now, again, it was approved 213 to 209, and this is what I said earlier that I wanted to highlight why there was the difference in number here with the 6 lawmakers opting to vote present. You had Representative Michael Guest, David Joyce, Andrew Garbarino, John Rutherford, and Michelle Fischbach, all Republicans, but they're all members of the House Ethics Committee. They voted present, as did Representative Ken Buck from Colorado. So we're going to talk a little bit about what some of the members had to say, what some of the media is saying about this. As I said, Adam Schiff taking it, in his words, as a badge of honor. Quote, today I wear this partisan vote as a badge of honor, knowing that I have lived my oath. Very high and mighty kind of talk. Representative Dan Goldman said, you are the party of George Santos. Who are you holding accountable? Don't lecture us with your projection. Now, Lauren Boebert, which I guess Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene really got into a scuffle on this too. Not on the vote itself, I guess on other issues we may get to later on, but Marjorie Taylor Greene believes that Boebert had taken the language that she came up with in a bill to impeach President Biden and copied it as her own. And that led to a back and forth. She had said, I wanted you to co-sponsor, not just take the language. And let's just say there was some name calling that I can't use on the program. But Lauren Boebert said if Adam Schiff has a shred of human decency left, he would resign from Congress in disgrace. His tombstone should read of his failed career in Congress and should be one word, liar. We may talk a little bit more about this in just a little bit. But first, when we come back, we're going to hear from our guest, Isabel Vincent. She is the author of Overture of Hope, Two Sisters, Daring Plan that Saved Opera's Jewish Stars from the Third Reich, that is out on paperback now. You may know Isabel Vincent's name from the New York Post. She's an investigative journalist there. So stay with us. We'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on beautiful Market Street in Corning. We have our guest come up in a moment. My time was off just a little bit, so I want to continue this discussion on Adam Schiff and his censor last night. They made Schiff present himself in the well of the House floor while McCarthy read the resolution, I should say, and called for the Ethics Committee to conduct an investigation into Schiff's, quote, falsehoods, misrepresentations, and abuses of sensitive information. Now, Adam Schiff, of course, in typical Adam Schiff fashion, now you got to remember, too, he is vying for that seat that of the retiring Dianne Feinstein in the Senate. So Anderson Cooper, what is your response to this censor? So, of course, as soon as this was done, Adam Schiff finds the first show he can be on, and, he is running for that Senate seat. He said it's a badge of honor, as Roosevelt said at the time. Sometimes you can judge a person by the enemies they make. This was a MAGA resolution that Donald Trump threatened if any Republicans voted against it like they did last week, they'd be subject to a primary challenge. So this is basically Trump and MAGA world going after someone they think is effective and standing up to them. So I feel like I've earned their opposition and was proud to stand with all my Democrat colleagues and oppose the flagrant abuse of the House process. You can go through the various past censors. You can go through the past impeachment over Trump. How many times was that brought up? But now it's flagrant abuse. And again, I think there's a point there that there's a flagrant abuse of Adam Schiff's powers with what he said at the time. As I mentioned earlier, some of the hyperbole, some of the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I see stuff that you don't, and it's all here. And then, of course, that never came to fruition. So Anderson Cooper says, do you have any regrets on how you handled the Russia issue? The president was never criminally implicated for anything involving Russia. So Adam Schiff's essentially doubling, tripling, quadrupling down, saying, no, not at all. I think the investigation of his misconduct was very important. It ultimately led to his impeachment, which I was proud to lead. It led to the first bipartisan vote to remove a president in U.S. history. I was also proud to serve on the January 6th committee, and I would do it all over again. And I would do it the same way. What is really the gravel of the offense here is I feel I was effective at holding him to account, and if the need were to arise, I would do it all again. So his line of reasoning is that I was just too effective. I was too good. And that's why they censored me. Now, there's plenty of people that weighed in on it on Twitter. I'm not going to get to all of that. You can find them for yourself at various outlets. I will say Representative Ely Crane said, I'm thankful Representative Luna had the courage to push forward and force a vote on censoring Adam Schiff. Schiff intentionally misled the American people when he knew all along there was no proof of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. He lied and should be held accountable. Burgess Owens, the former football player, now representative, saying, empowered by the House Intelligence Committee gavel, Adam Schiff abused sensitive information and lied to the American people. As we saw this week, there's a two-tiered system of justice at play. Interesting tie-in from Burgess Owens. And Congress has the constitutional responsibility to deliver accountability. So that's our quick look at the censor of Adam Schiff last night. I'm sure this is not the last we will hear about it. I know now, and this is what I mentioned earlier, that Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene are at a war with each other because now there is the resolution to impeach President Biden. I'm not sure where that will go. McCarthy's signaling that he is opposed to it in this way because it's the wrong timing in his mind. That's why I guess I was a little surprised because there was 20 Republicans that voted against the original censor. I know I'm jumping around on two different topics, but censor of Adam Schiff. Now, that was because there was a $16 million fine, but I guess I was a little surprised that this did go through because there were so many that were not opposed to it the first time, but that I was kind of surprised voted no. So this is all kind of interesting. One of those random Wednesday change up the news cycle kind of stories because it happened late last night. So If you want to talk about it, you want to weigh in on it, contact me. I would love to hear from you. What did you think of the censor? What do you think about the potential resolution being brought forward by Lauren Boebert, voting to impeach Joe Biden this week, arguing now she wants it now. McCarthy saying now is not the right time. Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying Boebert stole the language for this resolution from her, and that she had originally asked Boebert if she would co-sponsor it with her, with Boebert essentially refusing. And this is Marjorie Taylor Greene's mindset, taking the language and making it her own. And there was some choice words, let me tell you. So weigh in on all of this by contacting me. But right now we're going to take a short break, because when we come back, Isabel Vincent and her book, Overture of Hope, Two Sisters, Daring Plan that Saved Opera's Jewish Stars from the Third Reich. That's when we come back, so stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Joining me for the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program, Isabel Vincent. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
I can't wait to hear about this book, Overture of Hope, Two Sisters' Daring Plan that Saved Opera's Jewish Stars from the Third Reich. So before we get in kind of the nitty-gritty of why you decided to write this book, could you tell us a little bit about the two women themselves?
Sure. So the book is about British sisters, Ida and Louise Cook, who became opera fans in the 1920s and the 1930s in London. And they became crazy, opera groupies, and they befriended a bunch of divas, some of the biggest divas of the day, including Amelita Galli-Curci and Rosa Ponselle, names that are sort of way in opera's past.
Sure.
But they also befriended Clemence Krauss, who was a protege of Richard Strauss, and one of the biggest conductors of his day, and Hitler's favorite conductor. And I say that because Hitler put him in charge of the Munich Opera, which was to be really the showpiece of opera and cultural. Munich was to be the sort of showpiece city of the Third Reich. And Clemence Krauss asked the Cooks to please help him save his Jewish musicians and scholars. So he's a very complex hero, as are they, because they are these very plain women who by day are civil servants. They are copying typists in the London law courts, and on the weekends they go to these opera performances in Germany and Austria. This is before the Second World War.
Right. And
meet clandestinely with the people that they end up saving.
Well, that's what I was curious about, how they got their foot in the door, because it seems tough for a cell of two women that, to all of a sudden knock on the door of these opera stars of the day and say, hey, I want to save you.
So what they, so first of all, they befriended all of these big stars by sort of standing outside the stage door at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden in London and asking for their autographs and asking if they could take their photographs. And then they just pursued them. They ended up going to Salzburg in 1934 for the Salzburg Festival. They had taken pictures of Clemence Krauss and his wife, the soprano Viorica Ursuliak, and they just pursued them at Salzburg and said, here are your pictures, can we have them autographed? And so, they sort of infiltrated the network, if you will, that way. And then that's when Krauss decided that, maybe I can put these fans to good use.
Right. How much research went into this book? Because I can't imagine it was very easy to find a lot of the background information on this, was there?
No, and it was 5 years worth of research at archives in Austria, Germany, Jerusalem, New York City. The way I was able to piece a lot of what they did together was through the fan letters that Ida wrote to her opera divas, in which she would relate everything she and her sister were doing. So I found a trove of letters at the New York Public Library's Lincoln Center Performing Arts Library, and there were all these letters from Ida Cook to Rosa Poncell, sort of detailing everything they were doing. In addition to that, I mean, there were a lot of obstacles. One was that Louise Cook, the older sister, had burned the archive of the people that they saved, and the big question was why. At first, I thought they were both sort of working for the British Secret Service, and they didn't want any trace left. But people told me that Louise was such a committed civil servant that she probably wouldn't want people's private information sort of hanging about, after their own deaths. I mean, who knows why she did it, but her younger sister Ida was pretty upset when she found out about that.
How did you hear about the story?
So a friend of a friend went to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust memorial in Jerusalem, and had walked by the tree planted in honor of Ida and Louise Cook. They were made righteous among the nations. They were given the distinction of righteous Gentiles in 1965, among the first women to receive the distinction, and around the time that Oskar Schindler and Raoul Wallenberg, the Swedish diplomat who saved thousands of Jews in Hungary, were given the distinction. But everybody sort of forgot about them because they were women and self-effacing. Anyway, the person, my friend who had seen this, said, I'd never heard of Ida and Louise Cook. And then it just started doing the research and fell in love with their story.
How do you keep the passion over 5 years to tell this story?
Every little discovery was totally exciting.
Yeah.
For instance, I found letters from Ida Cook to Clemens Krauss's secretary in Munich asking for 80 opera tickets for one performance. And I was like, why does she want 80 opera tickets?
Yeah.
And it turned out that what she was doing was money laundering through opera tickets. She would get her would-be refugees in Munich, say, to pay for the opera tickets. She would bring her friends from London. Sometimes she just bought the tickets.
Right.
And she would get the people in that they were trying to save to pay all of the expenses in the local currency in Germany, and then they would only get their money back once they'd made it safely out to England. Because if you were a Jew wanting to leave the Third Reich in 1938 or just before the war in 1939, you had to surrender your assets. You could only take with you 14 Reichsmarks. So this became a way for money to cross a border without, really crossing a border. So it was just ingenious.
Yeah.
And, and then I found letters, I talked a little bit earlier about Clemens Krauss being a very complex hero. I mean, I found letters of him sort of demanding to Hitler's secretary, Martin Bormann, that he should get the Jewish apartments abandoned in Munich after Jews were rounded up and sent to concentration camps for his opera stars, because he was bringing opera stars from Austria and from other parts of Germany, and they had nowhere to live.
Yeah.
So at the same time that he's doing this, he's also instructing these sisters to help save Jews. I mean, how do you sort of deal with that as in a character? And I just thought this is so interesting. And every time I found something like that, it sort of sustained me in doing the research.
I mean, I know you as an author, I'm sure would want this, but it really does sound like a movie.
Yes. So supposedly the film rights have been sold.
Oh,
I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it actually gets made into a movie. So the producer, who was the former president of Merchant Ivory, I don't know if you remember them, but they did these great films in the 80s, Howard's End, Remains of the Day.
Okay.
They're looking at it to turn it into a film, but I just think it's Hollywood is so unpredictable and it's such a long process, but my fingers are crossed.
Sure. Well, I mean, it was a long process for their story to get out in the first place, right? So as long as it doesn't take that long.
They did tell their story in 1950. Okay. Ida published a memoir, but the memoir was so elliptical. Like, she didn't really go into what had happened to the refugees.
Okay.
And then she tried her hand at a Hollywood script, actually, but it was so. I read the script. I found it at the Library of Congress among Josh Logan's papers. Josh Logan being one of the greatest directors, producers of the 1960s, who did Paint Your Wagon,
Oh, sure.
South Pacific. So he had spoken to them, and he had wanted to do a film about their adventures. And there were all these letters back and forth between Ida and Josh Logan, and apparently he had written, or he'd had a script written, and Ida was bristling that, you know, it was too fictional, because there was a love story in it, and they were just these two unmarried sisters, you know, who led their most exciting lives through going to the opera, and then with Ida writing romance fiction. She wrote 200 Harlequin romances in her lifetime under the pseudonym Mary Burchell, and the cash from the advances was used to help some people leave Germany and Austria. But so they did try to sort of capitalize on what they had done, but nothing ever got made. I mean, the first line of Ida's script, because she tried her hand at her own script, reads, "This is the story of two squares." So you can imagine how Hollywood dealt with that.
Yeah, that's not the eye opener or the beginning that you want to keep them hooked on. When you're doing the research on this, and it sounds like there's so many surprising stories, was there something that stuck out to you that was the most surprising through all of this?
Yeah, you know, what surprised me was what happened to people after they were saved, you know, because we hear about, when we talk about the Holocaust, the story sort of ends with people being saved or people dying. So what happened to a lot of people was that they had a hard time once they were saved, and there were some suicides that I wasn't expecting. Like, after people are saved, this one deputy conductor who ends up living in London ends up committing suicide because he can't make it as a conductor there. He doesn't learn the language. He finds out his mother was gassed at Auschwitz. So what does he do? He turns on the gas in his flat and dies the same way she did, but dressed in his tuxedo, you know, as if he's going to go conduct an opera that night. And this was all in the coroner's report. So, you know, when again, talking earlier about what keeps you going over the years that you're doing research, little things like that you just can't make up, right? You know, were incredible.
Were you an opera fan before you wrote this book?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Are you now?
A lot about opera.
Are you now or no? You're just.
I mean, I like certain operas. I wouldn't say I'm a crazy opera fan, you know, but you enter the opera world and there are really people devoted to opera.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of still in the opera's early days of, you know, what Ida and Louise were listening to, and some of that has just been truly amazing opera, like Rosa Poncell singing the Pace Pace aria from La Forza del Destino, which you can still hear on YouTube. It's just incredible.
Wow. So what book is next? Do you have one already in the works?
Oh, I wish.
This was enough? This was enough for a while?
No, I mean, I'm always looking at, I always have ideas, but they don't always become a book. Like, I get excited about every story that I work on.
Is that right? Because I was going to ask, how do you pick a topic? And again, kind of going back to what we said originally, keep the passion for it. Do you sometimes, when you start a book, realize that maybe I'm going down a rabbit hole here that's not going to work?
I go down a rabbit hole every day in my job. I mean, it's incredible. You know, doing investigative work, it's like, you just get stuck in it. Yeah. And sometimes it yields, and sometimes it doesn't.
Sure.
So, you know, the same with books. Yeah. But I just try as much as I can.
Well, before we go, and thank you for giving us so much time this morning, where's the best place to buy Overture of Hope?
It's on Amazon. It's also Barnes and Noble. It's pretty much everywhere.
Oh, great!
And the paperback is out, so it's much more accessible now.
Okay, and we'll keep an eye on Hollywood. See when that.
Yes, me too.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an honor.
Of course. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Thank you to Isabel Vincent for being our guest on the program during the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. I want to highlight what I was talking about before break just because we haven't really had a real chance to dive into exactly what I was saying. I was giving you generalities, so I want to dive into that. After that, we are going to hear from Maggie Hall from Big Fox News at 10. She did a great job on a piece from the Corning Salvation Army that I want to highlight for you. But before that, so McCarthy is warning this faction of Republicans who are pushing for impeachment of President Biden to take a step back, maybe to relax on it, because now is not the time in his mind. They wanted to go through the committees and done the right way. They had a closed-door meeting, so again, this coming from CNN, and it's a closed-door meeting, so take it with a grain of salt. But McCarthy argued that Republicans should let committee investigations play out and warned that jumping to impeach now could threaten their slim majority. Now, if you read the headline, I think it's a little misleading, saying, what majority do we want to believe, or to be, excuse me, and I thought, what is that? What's he trying to say? Well, he noted that House Republicans have taken back the House 5 times in the last 100 years. And 2 of those times lost the majority the next cycle. So that's what he's referencing. He says, what majority do we want to be? Give it right back in 2 years, or hold it for a decade and make real change? When asked by a reporter yesterday if he would support the resolution to impeach Trump, wow, that was going back to, that's what happens when you talk about Adam Schiff all morning. You think about impeach Trump, that's all he pushed. Impeach Biden. He said, I think to prematurely bring something up like that, to have no background in it, it undercuts what we're doing. Yeah, it does undercut what they're doing at the committee level. So that's why I mention it. And I want to get your opinion on it. Sorry, we had just someone outside the window. If you have an opinion on this, I would love to hear from you. Let's go back. Let's get that off the screen, and we'll go back to our contact information. It's just interesting. It kind of... it does seem like some of these, not Adam Schiff necessarily, but it does seem like a rush in this scenario as it's going through committee. But there are some people, and that's why Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene are having this sort of infighting, which, again, they haven't really, according to reports and some things we've seen, they're not, there's no love lost between the two. They're not the biggest fans of each other. But a little bit here of trying to outdo each other, too, and that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying. Why don't you co-sponsor my resolution instead of stealing the language from my resolution and you calling it your own? Now, I don't know if that happened. This is just what is being reported last night. Then there was some name-calling. So I hope as Republicans we're not trying to outdo each other in that sense. Who can be the quickest to present something, who could be, let's be the most thought out on this. Now, I will mention, because we talked about Adam Schiff earlier before we go to break, I received a comment during the break. This is, where did it go here? Schiff finally got the recognition he deserves. Shifty Schiff. Okay. Well, thank you for giving me a lot of potential to get in trouble there. But yes, I remember those nicknames. This is, here we go, another one. In my opinion, impeachment would be good to expose the corruption that power and greed enhanced by media support has brought forth. A cancer left untreated will eventually consume the body. I understand there's a lot of people that would like to see the impeachment resolution go forward, but it doesn't have more teeth if it goes through these committees, I guess is my argument. If you believe that you want this impeachment of President Biden, don't you want the best avenues to go down? Because didn't it seem like under the Trump administration they were throwing impeachment resolutions constantly without really any facts behind it? Just opinion. So that's where I come from. I want to have, if they are going to do that, have all your ducks in a row so it is not a failure or is not just a media spectacle. All right, let's take that break. When we come back, we are going to play that great clip Maggie Hall put together for Big Fox News at 10. That's when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you for joining us on Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. So Maggie Hall from Big Fox News at 10 did a great piece last night on the news for the Salvation Army. In full disclosure, I am the chairman of the Salvation Army board here in Corning, and that's why I wanted to take just a second to highlight this very special event that was held yesterday.
Rose and Ellie have dedicated a combined 50 years of community service partnering with Corning Salvation Army. I spoke with them today about giving back, getting involved, and what they've taken away from it all.
It's humbling. You're just a tiny, tiny spot in the plan of everything. And so I'm very grateful that I've been able to do the little I could do.
And it's so satisfying knowing that you've helped, even if it's the smallest piece of your time.
They were presented with the Lifetime Achievement Award by the board of the Salvation Army.
This is a fantastic opportunity to see these two women who have served so faithfully to the mission of the Salvation Army now being recognized for all of their faithfulness and commitment. We're excited.
Like mother, like daughter. Mary Ellen Monahan, program director for the children at Corning Salvation Army, was present to see her mom, Ellie Nasser, honored for her commitment to volunteerism.
I'm just very proud of her, just very proud of how she raised all of us, my family, and to teach us that it's not always about us, that we need to reach out and we need to give back. It's a happy thing to see and to be with her, and it's humbling. I don't think either of us expected any recognition. We just did what we filled the need that we saw.
And if it wasn't maybe if we were a little bit younger, we would still be volunteering.
Rose and Ellie were recognized as shining examples of what it means to be involved and to truly give back to your community. Maggie Hall, Big Fox News, Corning.
Thank you, Maggie, for putting that together for us. I know it was a little extended view there, so you didn't get to see quite everything. That's on my end. I just couldn't get that figured out quite this morning. But Maggie Hall did a great job. That's why you need to watch Big Fox News at 10. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you to everybody who has reached out. We've got a lot of comments on Adam Schiff, on the potential impeachment of President Biden, also a few unrelated topics, but that's great. And I appreciate this person that has called in, and I will invite school board members onto my show. Any school board member that would like to be on the program to speak directly to the voters. That's in Corning Painted Post, but in any school, I believe this one's specifically for Corning Painted Post, but that's for any school board. We'd love to have you on the program, superintendents. All you have to do is contact me here. That's the easiest way to do it. I don't want to play favoritisms by trying to reach out to certain people. I don't want to play the favorite. So please contact me at any time. I'd love to have school board members on. We have plenty of questions. So anytime you can reach out. Also, yes, there are, we do play this program on YouTube. They were asking if they could rewatch old Frankly Speakings. You can, but they're a week later. We encourage you to watch it live, and then we post it on YouTube a week later. just so that, again, we're encouraging you to watch it live so that you don't miss any of the action. All right, so thank you for reaching out. I know you had a few more things in here. I'm just reading it through now, and I do appreciate that. So please, everybody reach out and contact me with any questions, comments, concerns, or criticisms. One last quick break, and then we will wrap things up here on Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking, about to wrap things up. Boy, that went quick, and we covered a lot. I do want to mention a few quick stories we're not going to be able to get to. The opinion piece from CNN, who wins in the Hunter Biden plea deal? Well, lucky for this article, according to Norman Eisen, it's a win-win. Who is the win-win? Biden, the Biden family, and the wisdom of the plea from prosecutors. This is just conclusion all around. Just a conclusion. It's done. Claire McCaskill, now a political analyst on MSNBC, said, and by the way, everybody needs to back off Joe Biden about this, meaning the Hunter Biden scenario. He loves his son. Back off. It is okay for him to love his son, and there's nothing wrong with it. They have no evidence of any kind of wrongdoing by Joe Biden. It infuriates me that they're using this heartbreak against Joe Biden that way. It's just not right. And Jonathan Turley has a piece about all the crimes that Hunter's ridiculous plea deal missed. And his point, back to what McCaskill was saying, is that they're trying to make it about his addiction rather than corruption. And that's a piece at the New York Post. Jonathan Turley, all the crimes that Hunter's ridiculous plea deal missed. Now, if you don't know who Jonathan Turley is, an attorney and professor at George Washington University Law School. It's a lengthy piece, but it's definitely worth reading. I wanted to mention this last story before we go. A New York State issue talking about the fiasco of pot revenue. Listen to this. Because of the horrible rollout and all these illegal pop-up stores that we've talked about numerous times in the past, it says, and while the take is likely to grow as Albany belatedly gets it less wrong, the estimated tax take has dropped from Governor Cuomo's guess back in 2018 of $1.3 billion a year. That's what he thought we would be getting from legalized marijuana. Now, Governor Hochul is projecting just $1.25 billion over the next 6 years. So what Governor Cuomo thought we'd get more in 1 year than Governor Hochul is projecting over the next 6 years. Wow. The legislature wrote insanely complex rules for who should be first in line for a legal sale license, while also insisting on a Rube Goldberg scheme for helping the underprivileged qualify. And Hochul's Office of Cannabis Management has been accused of snubbing disabled military vets as well as women and minority-owned businesses and distressed farmers by prioritizing convicted drug felons for licenses. And we talked about that in the past. Meanwhile, New York cannabis farmers are sitting on 300,000 pounds of weed, and many are fearing that they will go bankrupt. And I mentioned this piece, again, from the New York Post, and it's from the editorial board. Albany politicians couldn't make money selling umbrellas in a downpour. Of course, and I like this line, of course, New York politicians aren't known for their understanding of how the private sector works, or even how government can operate efficiently. If the subject's not pay-to-play bribery, most are clueless. Apparently, they still figured they understood the pot business. Interesting. Yet, even by Albany standards, they produced bad policy, and it was executed terribly. And who knows what damage they've wrought on the mental health of the population by legalizing ever stronger, mind-bending drugs. We're not so naive as to look for any apologies for this mess. Sadly, it's too much to even expect them to learn a single lesson from a disaster of their own making. That's from the New York Post editorial board. Well, thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you to Isabel Vincent, the author of Overture of Hope. We'll be back on tomorrow with Assemblyman Chris Friend, so do not miss that. This has been Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox, have a great day, everyone, and we will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, starting at 7.